Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for webinar number 2 in our second series of the Real-Time Solutions webinar series. This series is brought to you by the Apple Valley, Burnsville, Hastings, Lakeville, and River Heights Chamber of Commerce. Some housekeeping this morning. All participants are muted, so please use the Q&A feature to ask questions, and we will get to as many as we can following the presentation. The webinar will be recorded and made available on partner websites for later viewing. The goal of these webinars is to address business concerns and questions as we continue to socially distance ourselves during the pandemic. However, considering the ever-changing business practices, the partners will continue to explore ways to use new technology in our Chamber's future programming. My name is Jennifer Harmoning, and I'm the president of the Burnsville Chamber of Commerce. We are here today to hear from Sherry Stolp as she shares her insights on the employer response to COVID-19. Thank you, Sherry, and take it away.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, too, and good morning, everyone. I'm really honored to be able to share a few thoughts today on the employer's human response to COVID-19. And I recognize that this is an unprecedented time, and all of you are dealing with both personal and professional challenges. I actually have the luxury of speaking with various employees throughout the Twin Cities. And consistently, the theme I continue hearing is that they're looking for their employers or their leaders or supervisors to be flexible at this time as much as they can feasibly possibly. They need to have empathy and they need to be supportive of what they're going through. And the good news is, as they're saying that they are, that the supervisors are surpassing their expectations, that the owners have been flexible with the requests that they've been making. So it's one thing that we know that they're experiencing that, but it's another now to continue that path forward as we bring them back in a lot of cases into the physical workspace. I'm going to be covering 3 key topics today, and we have a very limited time. So we'll spend probably about 20 minutes or so on those topics, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers. The first topic I'm going to be covering is the value of transparent and ongoing communication, and then followed by a bucket of workforce planning, which has to do with our reductions in force, our layoffs or furloughs, our return to work guidelines, and then also just I'll touch on the whole alternative work arrangement or working from home, which I know most of you are doing today, even for this call. And if there is time, I will spend some time talking through the urgent problem-solving value and what employees expect relative to their questions. So with that, the first topic, the value of transparent and ongoing communication. Harvard Business Review conducted a recent study, and what they found was 27% of the American workers reported that they've not yet been told anything formally by their employers relative to COVID-19. I thought that was an extremely high number myself. I expected it to be maybe 8–10%, but literally a quarter of today's workforce is hearing this news from the news or from colleagues or acquaintances, friends, versus the employer that they're employed with. So I did a little research and tried to uncover what specifically are those employers who are providing good connections with their people. What are they doing? And I came across with several elements. One being employers are picking a day of the week and making it be that information day and time. So for instance, every Tuesday at 2 o'clock, an email may be generated to their population, both either on site if they're working essentially or remotely. Or on Thursday at noon, they're actually having a meeting, a video conference meeting or a conference call. And the employees in those organizations are coming to know that that's the time to receive news and information. It's very helpful. It's consistent. They're also working with small surveys. They're gauging employees' attitudes by sending out a survey monkey, getting employee perceptions of how things are going, these touch points. They're sharing personal stories. I think this one is really key. It's talking about, as a business owner or a CEO or a leader in a business, the anxiety that you might personally be dealing with and your resilience. Finding out ways or strategies to overcome those situations and sharing that with your people. The humanistic leadership principle is key to trust building as well as engagement in your people. Other employers are emailing employees these articles, general articles on self-care, importance of safety, again, providing another resource to them and their families. I did find that one of the keys to this is being honest and having the authentic communication and dialogue. If sales are down, sales are down. Talk about it, share it, no sugarcoating here. Employees will value that, and obviously I think they know a lot of that anyway. So the key here is not only sharing maybe some negative news, but where your bounce back occurs. So what are the mitigation strategies to deal with those issues? How are you handling that? And think back to prior years where maybe your forecast was X and you didn't hit that forecast, but you dealt with it in other ways. Helping employees see that they're a part of that process, that they're a part of the solution. The other piece I would say that I found interesting is to offer simple pathways. Harvard Business Review talked a lot about this, where employees will have questions or concerns, and to give them a pathway or hotline numbers or employee numbers to call for those questions. You may think they have them, but during this epidemic, they may have misplaced it, or they don't really know who to call or who's accessible. So having an email that just states, you know, if you have a question on your benefits right now, here's who you reach out to. It can go a long way. The last piece of this segment I'd like to share are what I call creative engagement strategies. And a lot of you might already be using these, but the weekly Zooms, the weekly video conferencings that are occurring, employers are saying to mix it up has been helpful, including a happy hour format, maybe on Fridays at 3 or 4 o'clock. And rarely will you hear an HR person condone having alcohol at meetings, but in this case, no one is driving, and certainly can add some value from an engagement standpoint. Also, bringing kids or pets to the meeting have become popular. Some of you might already be doing that with remote workers. And then one of my clients told me the other day that they hold Uber Eats lunches, where the employer pays for all of the lunches of the staff. They're delivered 15 to 20 minutes before their meeting, and then they all come together for a virtual lunch. So to me, all of these can really help develop deeper connections with your staff during this time. So what's the payoff? What's the kind of the bottom line if you were to employ one of these or two of these? I would say, first and foremost, you will see deeper connections between your employees. Your staff members are going to find they didn't know Roy, excuse me, they didn't know Roy enjoyed golf, and they noticed in the video that he had a lot of golf stuff around his office. Or they didn't know that Carol enjoys dogs, and they saw a picture of a dog on her wall. So again, they're learning about the coworkers that they normally wouldn't know. There's also a deeper connection between staff and yourselves as business owners or leaders. You'll have a better retention post-epidemic. From a trust standpoint, kind of goes without saying, you're going to have deeper trust levels. And in general, I think just helping employees navigate through this critical time. You're their lifeline in a sense. So switching gears a little bit, let's start talking about the next topic. Now, I would call the workforce planning bucket a wide bucket, and certainly we could probably talk for hours about it. I'm going to try to narrow down to a few key points. And considering the diversity of the participants on today's call, I'd like to actually highlight a few areas or a few scenarios, so hopefully I can reach several of you. Now, some of your businesses are currently an essential business. You're doing well, your sales are maybe even surpassing what expected. You might have openings that you're currently filling. You're in actually a good stance today. Maybe the product you're delivering or service you're offering is needed during this epidemic. Others are actually on the other side of the coin, and unfortunately have been experiencing maybe reductions in force. Now, they can come in various forms. They can be your outright termination, which of course could be warranted. Maybe the employee has performance problems, or maybe you had planned to reduce that person further into the year, but now you've sped up the time. They could run in terms of furloughs, voluntary and involuntary. Now, the voluntary furloughs are those employees that raise their hands and say, you know, I wouldn't mind taking 30 or 60 days off. I understand I'm not getting paid, but I would be open to that, which helps, of course, the employer and the employee. The involuntary furloughs, on the other hand, are those terminations or layoffs due to COVID-19. I'm not sure if some of you have caught on LinkedIn over the last, I'd say, week and a half, Corey Berry, the CEO of Best Buy, delivered a very heartfelt message to her staff, specifically the employees at the retail stores. And she shared with them that it was a very difficult decision, but they needed to furlough those employees. But she communicated it with such empathy and such support that it conveyed that if and when, and I'm sure they will reopen, they can retain those workers and bring those workers back to their business. So again, another way of communicating this information. She did so on video, and I believe you could probably still find it out there on LinkedIn. I would say the majority of you on the call are working from home or a remote work environment. And what that has done is created other challenges. Now, the Society for Human Resource Management, which some of you might be aware of or have used, conducted a survey in mid-March. And what they found was that close to half of the American workforce has never worked from home. I thought that was startling. I thought it wouldn't have been at that high level, but in a sense, what they're saying is we're not used to this. We're not accustomed to doing this. And of those that have worked from home, only 29% said it was an actual alternative work arrangement. They said the majority of that population shared that they were working from home because of childcare issues, or maybe having to let a repair man or woman into their home. So that causes me to pause because I'm thinking about our readiness as a country, and I don't feel like we're ready for this undertaking. And we can sort of validate that with some of the challenges that we're hearing. The technology concerns, do we have enough laptops? Do we have the connectivity that we need? And maybe some of you are experiencing that with your service provider's bandwidth, not getting what you can get through that bandwidth because of the fact all of your employees and your neighbors and friends are all actually working, in technology land. And if we could go back, Jennifer, maybe to maybe a slide before this one, that would be helpful. I know we're kind of moving, perfect. And one of the employers I work with, the CEO had called me last week and he said, you know, Sherry, my biggest concern right now is winding up the spool. When we flip the switch and we actually bring everybody back in-house, am I going to get all of my employees back in-house? Which I think was a valid concern, and we talked about it. But what we sort of came together on is the fact that this individual took a great deal of time recruiting and selecting his workforce. And he felt like he had a top talent set of individuals working there. And he felt that once he shared it's time to come back, he thought the majority will. And when we thought about those that might not, I suggested he reach out to them individually and say, you know, at this point, I'd like you to come back, but I'm seeing that you've been very productive during this time at home from work. And I think we could work something out, maybe an alternative working arrangement with maybe 1 day working at home, 4 days in the office. So again, I'm sort of sharing this story on this call just to say, you know, maybe open up the blinders a little bit. And I think we may have all surprised ourselves the last 6-7 weeks where we have conducted work pretty well remotely. So a thought on that. So what will it look like when we return back on site? And I think there's several issues to kind of think through. I would say most of you probably heard Governor Walz's discussion yesterday at 2 o'clock, and his focus is to try to reopen some of our manufacturers and other businesses starting Monday, the 27th. So this might be timely that we're talking about this today. I would suggest thinking about your business process as far as phasing in the reentry, similar to what the organizations are doing nationwide. I would say think about who you might need day one. That might come in the forms of, the receptionist may need to be there. A supervisor may need to be there. Maybe it's an individual that's crucial or critical that has to be there facing customers that come in the door. But I would say take a look at how you could stagger the remainder of your workforce so that not everybody comes in day one. The other key is also to check in with furloughed employees. We are entering summer, and there may be some there that say, I could extend my furlough another 30 days. Yeah, that would make sense. Where others would say, no, get me back in as soon as you can because I'm going crazy with all of my family members being in the home 24/7. So again, kind of think about that individually and be creative. The other piece we need to talk through too is our work environment considerations. So, think about your layout of your business. Now, if you're in a restaurant and you have tables, there's going to be maybe some spacing requirements to take into account by the state. But I think in general, any workstation or cubicle layout of an office could go through the same process. Can you space them further apart? And I'll tell you that employees will come in that first day and be grateful they work for you. You're showing that you care not only about the working employee, but the human employee. The other piece too is this whole benefit bucket, right? So you think about PTO and those that you may have furloughed or temporarily on furlough. Was the PTO accrued during that time? You may have made that decision already or not, but just thinking ahead here, medical and dental considerations, as far as reinstatements for those that maybe didn't have coverage. How does that work? And have you been in contact with your benefits broker or provider? And they'll help you and navigate with you through that contract so that you're within the guidelines and limitations. And last but not least, a few of my clients have shared this in different words, but the same theme about completing a master tracking tool. Now, for the mid-size employers on the call, you might have an outsourced provider such as like ADP, and what they're doing is they're coding all of these situations for you, doing the heavy lifting. Those that aren't or have an in-house payroll, they may want to start a simple spreadsheet and list every employee down, what their scenario is. Maybe they're on PTO, maybe they've been temporarily furloughed, maybe they were laid off, but now you'd like to return them back. To keep order and consistency is key. Organization is everything, during a crisis. So the next slide, please. Thank you. I think we do have a little time here to talk about the last topic, and that would be urgent problem solving. And, I can't stress enough the importance of this. In the absence of information, employees fill in the blank with fear and anxiety, and sometimes rumor mills. And it concerns me because a lot of times well-meaning leaders, supervisors, or employers withhold getting answers back to questions for fear of incorrect answer or maybe not enough data. Analysis paralysis, I'm sure you've heard the term. But what that's actually telling an employee, oddly, is they're viewing it as you're not hearing them. They're not being considered. They're not important. And it really isn't, it's the farthest from the truth. Again, you're trying to get the answer for them. So I would say if you can put a rule of thumb of 12 to 24 hours of an employee's question during this time, it'll go a long way. And even if you have a misstep, you can respond proactively by saying, it's uncharted territory, please forgive me, we'll get this right for you. And in my experiences, employees do forgive. And another option would be to become a resource broker. If you don't necessarily have the time to deal with their question right then and there, you could say to them, I can get back to you, but I'm afraid it's going to take longer than you'd like. So I'd like to point you in the direction of Lori in our HR area, and I think she can better help you. And here's her number. When you say that, you may think in your mind it feels like a little passing the buck, and they might even listen like in that frame as well. But the truth of the matter is they're going to get their answer and be pleased, mostly. So I would suggest working through that. Okay, next slide. Thank you. I also would mention about instilling ongoing confidence. And when you think about what employees are going through, finding ways to re-emphasize their value is most important. You know, share what the company is doing now, what they're going to be doing next. The whole change element is better suited with information. You probably recognize too the way that the government has been handling this. I'm pleased to see the amount of information they have been sharing. I think in every state the governor is holding conferences daily, and then we're given access, for instance, to the COVID-19 portal. Not to say that we want to look at that information every hour, every day. And actually several friends of mine and colleagues have shared they take days off because it's just too much. But the point is to have that available. And I believe that's the same with employers and employees. Have the information available so that the employees feel supported. The other piece is take your time on the big issues. You know, there could be a question or a process change or something that's going to have a bigger impact on your staff. Involve your supervisor or supervisors in that. You know, think about different alternatives to that situation, and then take swift action. Find a way to make that come together, whichever route you take. I would also say during this time, instilling confidence is important to re-recruit your talent. Make sure that they know how valuable they are, recognize them, give them that feeling of worth. They will remain for you post-epidemic. And last but not least, I think the bar has definitely been raised. I know we're all doing things a little differently, using technology differently, working with people differently, and engagement principles underline that. And they really support solid leadership if your actions are solid leadership. Employees expect it. It's never been more crucial. And then I just wanted to share briefly about my business. We do support small to mid-sized organizations with HR, both in the project arena as well as an hourly HR on demand. So some of our service offerings are there listed on the slide. I'm getting a lot of calls recently about defining PTO policy, work from home policies and procedures. So I would very much love to hear from you if you are in need of some of those pieces, as well as handbook entries. So my contact information is there below. Feel free to connect with me. I'd love to hear from you and hear about your situation. Thanks. Jennifer, would you like me to go right into the questions that we received ahead of time?
Yes, I think that'd be great, Sherry. I want to thank a lot of you submitted questions ahead of time, and so we've submitted those to Sherry, and she can try to answer those now.
Oh, super. And I also wanted to say thank you to all of you that are on this call, but also those that have sent in these questions. They're thought-provoking, and I think they can add a lot of value here to our discussion. The first one was all about how do I keep my team motivated, which is so crucial. I thought about this last night, and some of the areas I'd say to press on. Recognition, as I just mentioned, is key, either in a group setting or one-on-one. Inject fun in your environment. You know, we talked about, you know, the happy hour Zooms, and bring your dog or your child into the meeting. You know, do something humorous. Manage by walking around. When we're eventually back in the physical locations, keep your distance, obviously, but still manage by being accessible and available. Connect with your staff by being visible. Another question that came in was, what are some of the good sources to check for local job opportunities? Great question. I personally like using Indeed and also Simply Hired, but the local source that's getting quite a lot of traffic is jobsinminneapolis.com. So feel free to check into that, as well as Snag a Job and ZipRecruiter. So those would be some other avenues to try. Another question that came in, I thought was really well crafted, and it talked all about how long can I keep an employee on our group health insurance when they're not physically working the number of hours we would normally need them to be. Excellent question. So I just wanted to pause and say I'm really excited and encouraged to see all of the different insurance companies relaxing their standards, not completely, but in some way. They're actually allowing things that would normally be prohibited based on the situation and timing we're in. So I would encourage this person who asked this question to connect with your benefits provider and request that they can maintain those employees that might be on a reduced work schedule. Now, in the same breath, I'm noticing that the INS is relaxing the I-9 administration. It used to be 3 days, you need to have all of those forms filled out and in to the government, and now they've relaxed and given you an additional grace period. Also, you don't need a witness to co-sign with some of those documents as before. And mainly because, and I noticed this on the website, there's a lot of remote working going on, including in some companies, remote hiring. And so to have a person next to you would be almost impossible. And I also will share about the unemployment realm, which was good news. For those on the call that have reduced their staff, in a normal or typical environment, your experience rating is directly correlated to the number of employees that you have on unemployment. In the current state, the unemployment office will not change your experience rating based on that volume, that increased volume. So it's technically frozen or on hold till post-epidemic. So good news on that front.
Sherry, could I jump in? We have a question coming in from the audience.
Yes.
And it says, could you please address the temperature taking for employers with their employees? Have you had any?
You know, there's a lot of discussion about that, but to be honest, I don't believe that answer has been shared. And I actually was in a meeting last week, earlier last week, and they were looking online, and it was actually a group of lawyers, and they're trying to uncover, and I don't think that it's actually been finalized yet. But my guess is it will become part of the reentry. And I'm wondering if they're going to share in which industries or size employers. There's probably more parameters coming. So stay tuned. I wish I had the answer to that question.
Yeah, I think to your point, in the governor's order yesterday and coming out from DEED, there is some indication that it's an expected part of the protocol for the businesses opening on Monday. But I think to your point, there's some legal questions about that. I don't think that's been answered of what people's pushback might be. So even though it was talked about even yesterday, I think we're going to need to get more clarification on that.
You're 100% right. And what you said just a moment ago, it has to do with the legal side and HIPAA and some of the protected conditions and sharing of information. So they're ironing that out, I'm assuming, in that way.
Right. We have 1 minute left. Do you have another question there that came in ahead of time?
Yes, actually, this one, I'll try to be quick here. They actually asked, you know, again, should we bring our entire team back at once, or should we do that in stages? And I alluded to in the presentation, I really feel strongly you should phase in your workforce. It's not only a good business practice, but the employees will resonate with that. And again, will feel that they're working for a strong employer, an employer that's taking those steps. And one other quick question, if we have 30 seconds, at what point does one decide to reduce staff? And I would say at all costs, if you can, check with those on voluntary furlough, because again, those individuals may want to extend an unpaid circumstance so that you can then not have to lay off a full-time or part-time employee. And I think those were all the questions.
Great, we made it. We made it in time. Sherry, thank you so much. This was great information. We're getting great feedback in the chat. And I want to thank you for joining us today. As I mentioned, this webinar is the second in our second series of 6. The next one will be on Monday, and the topic will be tips for working productively from home. You can look on the Chamber websites for the links and registration for that. This webinar was provided in partnership with the Apple Valley, Burnsville, Hastings, Lakeville, and River Heights Chambers of Commerce, and the recording will be made available on partner websites. Thank you all for joining us today, and we hope you have a great Chamber of Commerce day.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, everyone.